And
Keep going.
and then one year, one of the critics said, we should really get together at the end of the season in order to say what we have seen. So we started that several years ago. Admittedly,
But the proposal sounded
there's
good.
something that I'm sorry, are we okay? All right.
You're good. Everybody who's coming in from home, please mute yourselves.
So I'm very pleased that we were able to do this, and I must say, the critics have been absolutely wonderful. I'll invite them, and within 12 hours, everyone says yes. So it's really quite lovely. Just a bit of housekeeping first. That we have 2 theater parties coming up, and I do want to remind you, one is Seascape at the Unicorn, and that is Thursday, October 6th at 7 p.m. If you call up and book and you say Ali, you will get a discount, and we're hoping to have a Q&A afterwards. And then on Sunday, November 13th at 2 p.m., Lion in Winter. That is the Bridge Theater in Catskill, a wonderful little theater with 2 great guys who run it. And what else are we going to do in winter but go to the bridge and see Lion in Winter? All right, so we have here 4 critics and 1 sort of on standby who's zooming at home, who I'll introduce last. But first I want to introduce Barbara Waldinger, because she normally gets to the end of the alphabet because of the W's. So let's do a little precedent first. One of the things, everyone here was born in New York. So I'm sorry about that, but many of them have their credentials here for a long, long time. Barbara holds a PhD in theater from the City University of New York. She taught at Queens College, Hofstra, and in Marymount Manhattan College for a period of 25 years. This is her 18th year as artistic director of HRC Showcase Theater in Hudson, where she directs stage readings or original plays. This year, she held them at the barn, theater barn, and that the plays are selected by means of an annual national playwriting contest. As a full-time member of the Berkshire community, she teaches for Ali and Temple Anshi Amunum, and as part of the playwriting group Plays in Progress, which meets in Hudson, or used to meet in Hudson, and now it's been on Zoom for the last 2 years. This has been a very strange 2 years. She is a reviewer for the online publication Berkshire on Stage. We're always happy to have her here, and she is a director, a teacher, a critic, and a friend. Then I'm going to move on to our next woman, because I had not met her before. I've seen her reviews, and we're so delighted that she was able to join us today. It's Roseanne Kane, and she has not been part of the program before, so I'm going to give you a longer bio on her so we all know, because she too, New Yorker, theater actress, reviewer, and perhaps other things as well.
Director.
A director. And she's a member of the board of directors of the Berkshire Theatre Critics Association, which I think was formed by Peter and a few others some years ago to give out the Berkeys. She's an actress and director for most of her life. She studied at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, Emerson College, Hofstra University, and the New School. She appeared on stage in a wide variety of roles by playwrights. And I like what she says, ranging from Shakespeare to Neil Simon and Chekhov to Beckett. It's a great range. She taught writing at Hunter College, the 92nd Street Y, and a slew of other institutions. She was a promotional writer for Cambridge University Press, copy supervisor at Harper Row, editor of Quadrant, the journal of the C.G. Young Foundation for Analytic Psychology. You'll have to tell us more about that. You were on the faculty there in editorial level. Was that theater?
Carl Jung was a psychologist.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and a student of Freud, and they kind of came to have different beliefs, but it's an institute in New York where they train Jungian psychoanalysts, and the analysts who are in the institute are people who send in papers, and I would review the papers and edit them for their journal. And so, except for theater as symbolism or anything having to do with archetypes, so well, that's I tend to think that way in my reviews, but yes, I was with them for a long time and taught there for a long time.
Yeah, because it jumped out at me that I didn't know the exact connection of Jung and theater, but why not? Why not? Well, and then also she's appeared. I have a list of plays that she's appeared in all over the region, and thank you. Welcome. Thank you. Then I think I'll go to Jeff Borak, who has been with us before and is well known to all of you. He was the features editor at arts editor at the Eagle for years, and reviewed plays and still reviews plays. Is exceedingly knowledgeable, and he too was born in New York. But the credit of his that I really enjoy is he went Peace Corps in Ethiopia, and he taught in Addis Ababa, which is a place I love to pronounce. I've even been there. He, I, and one other person I know in the Berkshires have been to Ethiopia, but welcome. So glad you could join us again today, and we look forward to hearing your views on the season. And Peter. Peter is our Renaissance Berkshire man, writes plays, writes novels, is a critic. He started in the business at age 6 months, I think.
7 months.
7 months. You took a month off. And he has this lovely story how he started reviewing, and he started reviewing with, he was age 14 or 15.
14.
And he saw a play, Taste of Honey, and decided to review it. But it's interesting because A Taste of Honey was written by a 19-year-old who said, "Oh, that's a play, I can do that too." and she won awards in London for that as a 19-year-old. So there's a kind of nice parallel. And Peter also understands the economics of theater because he was making more money when he was 14 reviewing than now.
Not more, but pretty much the same.
Did you translate it for $1950 versus 19?
Actually, I haven't. I was making more in that case.
Peter's one of the founders of the Berkeys. He reviews for online for the Berkshire Edge and for various other publications. Which publications?
Principally, now it's 2022.berkshirebrightfocus.com.
And the other newspapers now are not doing
They're
much.
pretty much out of business.
Yeah.
Newspapers shutting down or reducing the content of what they will publish has been going on for about 20 years.
Yeah.
It's gotten worse and worse.
But Peter's credentials for this community are quite marvelous because he was attached both to the Edna St. Vincent Millay building and also the Herman Melville.
Yes.
And I know he also gives talks to Rhodes Scholars who come here. So he knows our history quite well and has contributed, and he writes poetry, prose, plays.
I should be famous.
But you are, you're famous. Anyway, let's, as I introduced you last.
One thing, Judith, do you know that the big square is still in the middle, saying this meeting is being recorded by the host or a participant?
That's on your screen. Everybody's not seeing that at home. Does it bother you, or can we just leave it there?
Yes, if you could just.
Yes, it blocks out the head in the middle, which happens.
Okay, I'll come in and fix that for you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I was looking at you. I wasn't checking. Peter, I introduced you last, so can we start with you? Could you tell us your thoughts about this past season? It's been so strange. I mean, I felt so strange and audiences are, I don't know.
Well, I don't think it could be called a strange season. For the first time in 3 years, it was a rather full season. I reviewed 121 shows, which is not the most I've reviewed in a single year, but it's certainly nicely up there. But then I review not just in Berkshire County, but in Southern Vermont, in Eastern New York State, out into the Pioneer Valley and down into Northern Connecticut. So I get around. So there are some weeks I review 3 plays in the summer and some weeks where I review 7. 7's hard because I have to write at least 2 a day on certain days. And it's a lot to do. And publishing online in particular, I have to do my own layout work, which means selecting the photographs for each production, placing them, making the review not just readable, but attractive. And sometimes that's hard.
Can I ask you what your highlights were?
You could. Highlights are difficult for me to pick out at this point in time. There have been so many that have been so good. A lot of world premieres around the region. It's amazing how many new and commissioned plays there have been. This past week, I saw a new commissioned play, All of Me, at Barrington Stage Company, which I liked very much. I had a lot of quibbles about the required or requested language for the writing of the review. I found troublesome and geared more to the production company and the actors than to readers of a review. PC language is very difficult on a lot of things. And it was a week of 2 shows about people with limitations of one kind or another. On Thursday, 2 days before I saw All of Me, I reviewed a play called Andy and the Orphans at Harbinger Theater in Albany, which was about a young man with Down syndrome, played by a young man with Down syndrome. I would say he gave a good performance, but I couldn't understand most of what he said, which is part of the Down syndrome problem. So God knows that was accurate, but whether it was good acting or not, I really cannot be sure. He did a good job. He played himself essentially in a role about a young man whose parents have recently died and whose older brother and sister are trying to find a way to broach the subject to him during a long drive from upstate New York to Montauk, Long Island. And it's an odd play. The company did a very good job with it. But sometimes it's difficult writing about a role in terms of the actor playing it. Part of the joy of acting is getting to play something you're not, creating a character. And in the case of both All of Me and Andy and the Orphans, the principal actors were essentially caught doing a version of themselves or themselves they could actually be, whether they are or not.
Roseanne has some reaction to what you're saying, I think.
Yes. I saw All of Me, not the other play that Peter mentioned. And I have some disagreement with Peter about that. I loved All of Me. The 2 actors in the lead roles both used wheelchairs. In the show, one used a scooter and one used a wheelchair. And they're great actors. I thought they gave fantastic performances. They acted before I'm sorry, I don't have the actors' names at hand, but the man who played the leading role had an accident, a terrible accident later in life, and he had had a career as an actor before that. The woman who played his romantic interest uses a wheelchair in real life. I don't know whether she's used one all her life, but she was on Broadway in a revival of Class Menagerie, the first actor playing Laura who uses a wheelchair, and I think that's perfectly appropriate casting, but, you mentioned, Peter, the difficulty with language and it didn't, I don't think it, bothered me as much maybe as it bothered you. I can understand that sometimes maybe people, go too far for the sake of being politically correct or, yearning to have inclusiveness. But in this case, I didn't have a problem with it. I don't know if you want to specifically address the language you had a problem.
Sure.
But one of the things I just, when I asked about highlights, or it doesn't, I didn't even mean that in a positive sense. Was there a terrible disappointment?
Yes.
I mean,
We'll get to that.
What?
We'll get to that question.
No, so,
yeah.
what do you take away from the season of things that you remember? One great actor or a new play or something? Jeff, can you talk to that? You're a student of theater.
Sometimes I, never mind. Couple of things about the summer. Black Lives Matter this summer in ways that it never has or hasn't on Berkshire stages. And in a way, I was relieved to see that because we tend to live in a bubble in the Berkshires. And with all of the developments that are happening in theater beyond here, it felt to me we had yet to see some of that affect us in terms of what kinds of plays were programmed. I think we've seen diversity in casting, certainly, especially at Shakespeare and Company. But this year we had a number of plays that took on really critical issues, especially in terms of Black lives, which sort of raised a question for me. And some of those issues were raised by directors in plays that didn't even call for them. And I think gratuitously, Songs for a New World comes to mind right away, which is not a show I admired very much. Now I just lost the train of thought. I think, oh yes, I think it raised for me a question of how we, as white, and I'm going to assume liberal theater critics, talk about those issues in ways that perhaps are more meaningful. I'm not saying that we can't, but I wonder if there aren't resonances in many of these plays that we just don't appreciate and understand because of our own background and our own upbringing and what we bring to the experience. There were some, I can't say that I was well, to say you might be disappointed in something sort of means that you have an expectation to begin with. And for me, and I know I'm an outlier here, although it sort of made me go back and read this review to find out really what I wrote. If there was any disappointment for me, it was a little night music. And the reaction I got to that review made me think that I'd written a pan. And I went back and I read that review again. And no, it was not a rave review by any means, but it was not what I would consider a pan. For me, there were some issues that were disappointing because it struck at some weaknesses in this production that I didn't expect to find. For me, I thought this show would be a no-brainer. This is a show that Darren certainly knows how to deal with musically. Julie certainly knows how to deal with. First of all, she's directed the show before, but her strength is directing musicals. It felt to me this was going to be a real champagne evening. And for me, it was less than that. A surprise for me this summer was A Walk in the Woods, in the sense that Barbara and I had talked about this because this is a play that's been a real favorite of hers. It's never been a favorite of mine. Until I read the script before I reviewed it and before I sat down to talk with the actors, and I found myself going through the script and thinking, oh, wait a minute. And then this production, I remember doing an interview with a playwright who said that as far as he's concerned, scripts are just blueprints. It's not until you actually see the actors moving and hear the dialogue and watch them interact that you really get a feel for what the play is. And watching Johnny and Alan at work with James's impeccable direction just blew me away. I mean, this was just an object lesson in the art of acting and directing. I was really also taken by Ain't Misbehavin', which is one of the most difficult reviews I have ever written, because this is such a packed show. And again, coming back to an issue I raised, question that I raised before, it was a very, very difficult piece of material to wrestle with, because this was not your grandmother's Ain't Misbehavin'. Yes, it was entertaining, it was rich, but Jeffrey Page packed so much into this in terms of Black lives and Black experiences and that struggle and hypocrisy. It was just an extraordinary evening of theater. And I would also say, I rediscovered the Mac Hayden Theater this summer. I had started re-reviewing them last summer, and I'm not going to go into the history here, but Mac Hayden and I had had a long, painful history, and I had not been reviewing them for the longest time. Only in recent years have two colleagues, one of them, Macey, the other, the late Jonathan Levin, have sort of nudged me into giving them another shot. Macey also has nudged me into reviewing Bridge Street Theater, and I'm glad I have, even though I haven't been wildly enthusiastic, but it's another discovery. But covering the Mac Hayden this summer, especially with their productions of Next to Normal and You're in Town, they need to be, they're serious about doing theater now. This new management, artistic management, which has been there for a couple of years, there's just been, for me, a change, a real sea change in the Mac Hayden. And again, that doesn't mean that everything is good, but the level, well, except for Xanadu, but the level of failure, for want of a better word, is higher. And there's just a different creative energy there that I've really come to admire. So that kind of discovery.
Yeah, that's very exciting when you have a new theater that comes on the scene that you could recommend to people. And we do go to the theaters where they're doing things. We trust them. And you start to trust people, and that's particularly for a new play, you have to go and trust them. And we certainly hope that new plays are put on it. But Barbara, we haven't heard from you. May I hear what your season's highlights or lowlights are?
I want to agree about Walk in the Woods. I loved that script. I directed that script, but to see Alan and Johnny do it,
Yeah.
it was masterful. I wish I could see it again and again. I loved it. The other thing about Mac Hayden, Next to Normal, I thought that was the bravest choice I've ever seen. This is a musical about a woman who suffers from manic depression and what it does to her and to her family. And it's a musical, but it's so beautiful. And I remember seeing it in the city, and then I heard that Mac Hayden was going to do it. And I felt two ways about it. The first one was, I got to see it. And the second one was, oh no, how could it be as good? And so I went and I didn't know what to expect. And it was absolutely brilliant, especially the woman in the lead. It was brilliant, brilliantly directed and staged and sung and acted. I mean, when you got there and you had to check in with your vaccinations and the masks, and I was talking to somebody connected with the theater and said, how is it doing? And he said, well, we're not getting as many audiences as we hoped. And I thought, of course, because you took a chance. And I thought, congratulations to this theater for taking a chance on that play. And I just hope that they do more like that. And then I want to, Ain't Misbehavin' was, to me, also brilliant. The idea of having Black actors play both stereotypes and themselves that sort of double vision. It was so powerful. And then the other thing I wanted to say was, let's talk about the use of women, gender change this summer. For example, and this isn't something I reviewed, but I saw Moliere's, it was listed at the Fisher Center at Bard as Moliere's Don Juan. And I was once a French teacher years ago, and I loved this play. And I went to see it not knowing, which I found out when I got there, that it was completely translated into modern day English. There was no Moliere here. Maybe the idea of the story, I mean, it's the Don Juan myth is very famous, but that was it for Moliere. And it was, I have to say, terrible. Okay, so moving on. Also, it was not terrible because a woman played Don Juan and a woman played his servant. That's not what made it terrible. I thought that the women, because the director said she wanted to investigate what it was like for women to be in positions of power. Okay, to me, that was fine, but there was no Moliere, and that's what bothered me. The other places where there were women, Measure for Measure, Shakespeare and Company, they had a woman playing the Duke. And I found that a real problem. Yes, she was able to, the role of the Duke is, again, another investigation of a woman in a powerful position. But towards the end of that play, and it's very problematic, but we think from the things that I've read, that the Duke is actually proposing to Isabella, who's practically a nun. But then adding in that the Duke is a woman proposing to Isabella, it was totally confusing to me. And the other thing is that the woman who was going to play this role was unable to do it. And they had an understudy coming in. Well, she was not an understudy. They had an actress who was playing a couple of small roles, who suddenly, out of the blue, got called on to play the Duke. So she never had understudied it. And that makes me think about, what is the role of the understudy and how careful are the theaters in giving the understudy rehearsals, whatever. Anyway, this actress was reading the whole time, and it was very upsetting. And I thought, okay, they don't know what to do. They're in a terrible position. They have to put somebody into the role. But because the director insisted that it be a woman, because that was her concept, all the males in that company who may have done that role before were out of the running. They couldn't ask them to come in and do the role.
Did you find, was that?
I don't know if they even
We
tried.
saw it with one who was
Ariel Bach.
Yeah, we saw
Right.
it. So we did not see it with the understudy. And it didn't bother me. I was surprised that it didn't bother me because the Duke has characteristics that would not be founded. But that's fascinating. You think they did not ask any man?
I'm assuming they did not, because the concept of the director was to make the Duke a woman. On the other hand, I thought that in the Little Night Music, it was 3 powerful women who took over the whole show, which I thought were the most positive things about that show, were those 3 women. It's just they sort of blew away every man in the cast. Just loved it. And another theater that we really should pay more attention to is Dorset. Teresa Rebeck is an artistic associate. She's a brilliant playwright and a brilliant director. And I saw a play of hers last year that she wrote and directed, which was amazing. And this one is called Thirst. She directed it, didn't write it, but worked with the playwright as he was revising this play. And it was so well done, so well acted. This was just like in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead. They are characters from Hamlet, and while they're doing their play, scenes from Hamlet are sort of passing them by. In this case, this was while Long Day's Journey into Night was going on, and these are some servants. So it's like upstairs, downstairs. You never met the Long Day's Journey cast. You heard about them, but you met these servants and their relationships. And it was just brilliant. One more play that I wanted to point out was at Great Barrington Public, Things I Know to Be True. I thought it was wonderful. It was about a family and what they're all going through, and then dysfunctional, functional, whatever, what they're all going through. The performances were brilliant. The play was beautiful. The directing, the set, I loved it. And here's a theater that spent most of their season doing solo performances, but yet this play was really worth waiting for.
But that was exciting that another theater has come online in a sense.
Yes.
With the
Yes.
Frangioni and I have Roseanne, you were first,
Go ahead.
and then Peter.
I'm really glad that Barbara brought up the subject of women and casting this summer, because I had one huge disappointment this summer. I was very excited to see that the Williamstown Theater Festival was going to put on Most Happy in concert. Most Happy Fella. It's one of my favorite musicals ever. I think most people who are aware of theater would agree that it's Frank Busser's masterpiece. Well, it was destroyed. It was directed by Daniel Fish, who was known for doing the reimagined version of Oklahoma in New York. What he reimagined had nothing to do with the Most Happy Fella. He was it 4 or 5 women? I forget. 5. Thank you. Not only was the sequence of songs jumbled up, but it made no sense. The first, I think about 15 minutes of the show, we saw Mylar Streams making a curtain, and the women sang from behind the curtain, and that was just it for like 15 minutes.
Do you know who selected that? Was that Gersten, the new acting artistic director?
Yeah, it was. It was.
She had a chance to dictate the season. Okay, I didn't know who Meg did enough. Good. That's another thing. Speaking of women, we had 2 women who are powerful artistic directors left the Berkshires this season. So one was replaced by a man. I don't know what's happening yet in Williamstown. Do you know?
No.
Roseanne, did you want to continue?
Oh, well, I just want to say that I was flabbergasted
Oh, because of Mylar.
about, well, not just Mylar, it's just part of it, but by the whole production. All of the women had beautiful voices, but the songs they were singing from the script were all rearranged nonsensically, in my opinion. And they had the choreography and blocking was bizarre, again, in my opinion. They had women writhing on the floor or changing costumes, that it just made no sense to me. Did it make sense to you?
Yes, Peter.
It absolutely made no sense to me. In fact, 7 major numbers were cut from the score. There was no sense of the book. There was no narrative sense at all. It was just random songs in medleys. And when they got to 5 women standing upstage left, pretty far back, very close to each other with their heads together, singing, standing on the corner, watching all the girls go by. All I could think of was, okay, they've converted the show into the Most Happy Lesbians. Because the song in female voice makes absolutely no sense. Absolutely none. It felt intrusive and it felt hideous. And the evening itself, by the time we were done with it, left us with the impression that there was nothing good about the Most Happy Fellow. And that is just not true. It is one of the best shows ever written.
Yes, I agree. I agree with
I guess the reviews on that were a little scathing. I was
Not
sorry.
all. Not all. Jeffrey liked it.
Oh,
No, I
good.
didn't.
No.
I did
Oh.
not. Thank you.
I thought you did. I'm sorry.
No, I did not.
Oh, good.
It was
Congratulations.
universal. as
I
far as
wrote,
could
I
see.
wrote a preview piece. I mean, I interviewed, but no, I had no use for this show at all.
I was sorry because
I'm glad to hear
it's
it.
just, it came in, you know, that came in sort of last moment into things, and she was really so gracious. She immediately also came to the course of Berkshire previews to talk about it. I was hoping she would do well and that people would enjoy it, but it was a universal thing.
Well, Williamstown did a 3-play season. That was the only main stage show, and their other 2 plays were really quite remarkable.
Oh, good.
I wanted to pick up on something Barbara mentioned. 2 things. One, yes, I wanted to add in things I know to be true. That was just an extraordinary piece of theater, and also The Shot, which was Sharon Lawrence playing Catherine Graham in one of the pieces in the solo festival, the only piece in the solo festival that I thought made that festival mean anything. But Barbara used a word that I think really struck me about this whole season, irrespective of good or bad or successful or not, and that's courageous. To me, this was an extraordinarily courageous summer, and I would include Jenny Gersten's choice of The Most Happy in Concert as being a hugely, I mean, yes,
It was courageous. It was just.
but I think it was a hugely courageous step, and not just Jenny. I think the artistic directors, for the most part, not all, but for the most part, made some very, very courageous choices this summer. And irrespective of the outcome, I found that very, very exciting and very embracing and very much more interesting. It was exhausting writing because there were times when I thought, my God, I mean, I longed for the Agatha Christie at the theater barn, but there was no theater barn. I just wanted at least one night when I could go to the theater and just laugh or not have to worry about finding meaningful things scattered through the production.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because sometimes I feel like a Philistine when I say, oh, can't I just enjoy it and be stimulated in ways and also entertained in ways.
But they were also not only, to me, courageous choices, but in terms of the material, but courageous approaches. Again, not all of them worked. I felt some of them just fell flat on their face, and I found myself scratching my head and thinking, all right, I think I know what the director was after here, but why? What insight have we really learned from this?
But the artistic directors were all under such stress, I think, because they didn't know from one minute to another if they're going to have a cast that's healthy or if there's going to have an audience or where they're going to be. And
the issue of audience also came up
Yeah.
This summer. My anecdotal information, and we actually did a big piece on it in the Eagle, was that audience attendance for the most part was really flat, even flatter than a lot of artistic directors thought or hoped, and they're trying to piece together. I mean, there's all kinds of reasons why, I suppose. I'm sure there were all kinds of reasons why, and it's not a simple solution, but it was disturbing and worrisome.
I would also like to,
Sorry, I was just gonna say, I found that heartbreaking.
yes,
I did too.
the what?
It was heartbreaking.
Oh, yeah.
Well, at Williamstown, I remember for the performance I was at actually for Most Happy in Concert, it was a very sparse audience, and there was an usher getting into a conversation with someone sitting near me because she was telling people in the front rows if it was too close, they could move back to anywhere. She said, you know, we haven't even, and she got into a conversation and mentioned to a theater goer, there were only about 200 seats that had been sold for that performance, that was fairly typical. And that they weren't even selling the mezzanine. The one person show that came up from New York, Alex, apparently did very, very well on the main stage. And my sense was that well, anyway, they were not alone there. My information and from what I've heard is that this was scattered throughout.
Yes, Peter.
There were only 2 shows that I saw this summer that were sold out for opening night and apparently sold out for almost the entire run. One was Guys and Dolls at the Sharon Playhouse, which was a remarkable production and played to sold out houses through its entire run. The other one was Jersey Boys at Capitol Rep, which also was sold out. People I knew could not get tickets.
You love that, you told me.
I did.
And isn't it interesting, those two shows, lighthearted musicals, Guys and Dolls, a true classic, just a wonderful, wonderful show, and fun, and Jersey Boys, which is
Just what it is.
it is, well, it is what it is, but it's kind of significant to me that
Those are the only two shows that I know of that sold out.
Well, I think people were saying, like I was the obvious, the news is so distressing that you want a break from it. And that you don't mind if it's deep or profound and have you, but please don't depress me too much.
I'm talking about lighthearted musicals. I was asked to review Xanadu because we needed a reviewer to go in there and see it. And I thought, oh no, this is not for me. I'm not doing this. I don't want to see anything stupid. And so I thought, not going. But I went, and I had such a good time. I couldn't believe it. I was just laughing my way through this whole thing. And I thought to myself, what's wrong with me? Am I losing my standards? I mean, what's wrong with me? But I loved it. And it was totally over the top. The story was ridiculous. But the playwright, who's Douglas Carter Levin, was really, a real playwright, who's won all kinds of awards, knew that. And so there was a terrible movie, apparently, that everyone hated.
Yeah.
So he took this ridiculous movie and wrote a wonderful script that made fun of everything, so that the characters knew the story was silly, and everybody knew it. And they had a great time themselves on stage, and I in the audience felt the same way. They would do all kinds of gags, showing you that the thing was crazy. Somebody was chewing a piece of scenery, and they made the theatrical joke about, oh, you're chewing the scenery. They were just silly things. Somebody in the middle of the play said, yeah, there's no creativity in the theater anymore. They take a stinkeroo movie and call it a show. I mean, they made these funny comments all through, and it was clear that they thought what they were doing was silly, and so you could relax. You didn't have to judge anything. You could just say, you're right, and this is fun. They're running around on roller skates. It was fun. And then, but when I talked to Jeff about it, he disagreed. And so I think, that maybe that's just my feeling, and I wondered how everybody else felt.
I didn't see it.
Oh, okay.
I loved it.
Oh,
I
good.
had a great time with it.
Okay.
It's not a show I wanted to see ever again, having seen it before. But again, I had the same kind of violently funny reaction that you did. I could not stop laughing. And the performers were superb. They were wonderful. And they sang the awful songs, and they danced the awful dances, and roller skated like crazy.
And they did nutty things. Each one of them was sort of encouraged to come up with comic business, and they did.
So is this a advice for artistic directors for next season as to what they should look for, what they should try to put on?
Not
Or we're
really.
gonna go back to
I don't
waiting
think so.
for Godot?
I don't think so.
No.
No, but another point I wanted to bring up, which is, and I know the theaters wanted more audience members, and I know they were sort of starving for people to come see the shows. But at what point do you cancel the show? Because too many people have COVID and you're using understudies all over the place. Isn't there a point where you say, instead of, I'm talking specifically about Dracula, and unfortunately they had a terrible problem with COVID in the cast. And I saw it one night when they had, out of 9 actors in the play, 4 of them were understudies. And I thought, why? Some of them were reading, some of them were not, but they clearly weren't really understanding their characters. Why do this? Apparently, the next day, the rest of the run, which is only a few days, was canceled. And I just wonder, what should artistic directors know about this? I know they need to make money in order to exist, but at what point do you make the decision to say, I don't want to do this to an audience. It's not fair. They're not seeing the play as it should be and as it was directed. Let's just cancel this.
And we may still have that problem next year, right?
Yes.
Which is really.
Hopefully, by next year, they won't have that problem, but potentially it's there.
Yeah.
Two things. One, I mean, obviously, the issue of the COVID doesn't come up until they're in rehearsal, or in the case of Dracula, performance. So it's, I think you're right. At what point, once the show is open, do you make that decision? We can't go on. But I think your point about the question that you raised about how theaters are programmed, this is a hugely difficult decision for artistic directors to make, because they're constantly balancing wanting to do material that will stimulate thought in an audience, that will raise important issues, to do them in ways that they feel will offer new insight into the material or come at it from a different way. And at the same time, understanding that audiences want to be entertained. And so how do you construct a season that does all of that, that allows new work to be done? The whole idea of the not-for-profit theater movement was to provide a field in which exactly this kind of work can be done. I remember way back when the Guthrie Theater in its infancy decided to do Guys and Dolls, and the uproar, according to articles I read, was incredible. This is a commercial musical. What should a not-for-profit regional theater be? What business do they have? My argument would be, why not? This is an American classic, and I don't think. And the same thing happened when Peter Hunt, in his first solo season at Williamstown, opened his season with a funny thing happened on the way to the Forum.
Which
A
was great.
lovely, enchanting, fun, crazy musical. And he also did Harvey that season. And among a lot of my colleagues and friends, everybody was scratching their head and saying, what direction is Peter taking this theater in? Why are we doing that? Why not?
I've heard wonderful controversial discussions on it. Should we do the old classics, or why don't we give something new a turn, and why are we doing the old classics? And I've heard very reasoned and understandable persuasive arguments for both. Roseanne has a.
I just wanted to say, I think Barrington Stage achieved that this season by having the mix of plays that they have, ranging from Andy Warhol in Iran and A Little Night Music, which I thought was spectacular. I loved it. And the play we were speaking of, All of Me. I mean, it was quite a potpourri place, and I think they were wonderful.
It's so interesting. You say we bring a certain baggage ourselves to whatever we're seeing. But when we see things that are done differently, it's sort of exciting to see it done. But I know that you were very controversial because you didn't join others saying how much you loved A Little Night Music. And of course, that has my favorite line of all time in it, losing my timing so late in my career. I mean, I clenched my throat every time I heard that line, but it is interesting. I mean, when I first came up here, 10, 12 years ago, and heard that Barrington Stage was going to do some amazing New York, a musical that was on stage in New York, I said, how are they going to do that? And Julie brought it off, as she did each year, from Fiddler on the Roof, Pirates, the Pets, all that stuff. It's quite amazing. So you applaud the play, and then you applaud the courage and also the talent of those who put it on under very different circumstances.
But Julie did this play. I mean, she didn't direct it, but Barrington offered a play called ABCD, which as an educator, I thought, I do want to see this, because there are plays where we talked about beforehand what we wanted to see, and then now that we've seen it, we can say how we thought, how we felt. But I was very disappointed in that play, because I thought, you know, this is a chance to talk about our educational system and what it does and the pressures on it. And I thought that this playwright was young, I think, and just finding her voice, sort of lumped together, you know, a school that's underperforming and how there was cheating there to try to bring up, you know, the scores on tests so that they could get funding, and you could sort of understand that problem. And another, a school that's, you know, a high achieving white school where the students were cheating because they had to get into, you know, Ivy League colleges. So there was cheating going on in both cases, but I felt that by throwing them all into one pot, you sort of weakened everything that you were trying to say. So I found it very disappointing, even though, yes, it was brave to do a play like this, but disappointing with the, in terms of results.
I would agree with that. That was the one weak link, I think, in Barrington's stages season. I thought the actors were good, but the script suffered. It wasn't enough.
So I wondered, are there other plays that you guys, I remember we all talked about Most Happy. We all said, oh, this is the one thing we definitely want to see. It's different fish, it's so different, what's going to happen? And then look at that. I mean, so how did other plays that you saw this season measure up against your expectations?
Also, I'd like to hear what you're looking forward to seeing from now till Christmas. I had mentioned that we organized 2 theater parties, one for Lion and Winter and one for Seascape. But are there other things that are coming up that we should know about, that you are eager to see or worried about, or?
I worry about it all. I look forward to it all. That's my problem. I love theater. It's my life. It's been my life for over 70 years. I look forward to every play, every season, and I live in hope that it's going to be wonderful. 9 times out of 10, I get close. The 10th time for me is pretty awful. I mean, Chester Theater, which does 4 plays a season, did 4 interesting plays this year. The second one, Passover, which I had looked forward to immensely, I hated from beginning to end. I did not apparently understand it. I was told afterward by a friend who went to see it and went to a group discussion at the theater after the play that it was based on Waiting for Godot. I didn't see it then, I don't see it now. But what disturbed me was the great performances by these 2 Black men in the leads and a terrific performance in 2 different roles by James Barry, who I think cannot do anything wrong, quite honestly. Disturbed me to the core. I had difficulty driving home because he played a rather butchy, nasty policeman and a very nice white man who celebrates the existence of these 2 Black men who live on the street with a picnic and with glorious praise, and then came back at the end of the play with his same basket and without provocation pulled out a gun and shot one of the Black men dead. And I did not get it. The only message I came away with from that play was that white people cannot be trusted. Don't believe what a white man says. And I thought, I know that can be true of many people, but it's not true of everybody. And I didn't like the generality of the message.
I didn't see that, but I'm so surprised because I think we all love Daniel, the artistic director there. We'll go to what he has because he finds material that is worth seeing. And I know you're a fan of his as well.
I am, but again, a couple of things race through my mind here. First of all, although I don't think this is one of Chester's better seasons, but again, look at that choice that Daniel made to do that play. Again, irrespective of outcome and irrespective of any one of our reaction to it, this is so unlike anything Chester has ever done.
Right.
And for Daniel to take that step, and in fact, when I was talking with him, he said he really didn't expect to get the rights for the play. He just threw it out there. He felt it was a play they should do. He asked for the rights, and lo and behold, got them. There's also something else that I often hear when people react to, I was going to say negative, but let's say unfavorable reviews, and not just by me. Me write an unfavorable review. And that is, if only you understood this play,
Yeah.
then, well, that may be true, but is it not possible that we understand the play and still don't like it?
Absolutely. In terms of things that are coming up, Bridge Street Theater, which is Bridge Street Theater in Catskill.
Yeah.
Has an interesting season. They're doing a new play next month, which I'm looking forward to. The title of which I cannot get right in my head. Sexual misconduct in middle class?
Yeah.
In the middle class. Which sounds weird. And I'm looking forward to it because I know nothing about it. I love finding new things. Jeffrey is very good at it.
Is that those two men there also love theater so much that they have the first 2 days, I mean, you charge, you pay what you want,
Yeah.
and they just really want to offer.
And they offer things at rather reasonable prices. Their recent
For
play,
sale.
Shelley's Shadow, which I thought was quite remarkable. They were selling tickets for $15. You can't go to the theater for $15 anywhere else that I can think of. Maybe, I don't know, Town Players if they ever come back. But they do take chances. They do take chances on new things and on unusual things. And when they do a classic, they sometimes do it better than you would ever expect. Their Long Day's Journey into Night last season was extraordinary. And Stephen Patterson, who won Berkey last year for solo performance for Miss Gulch Returns, went from that playing a nightclub singer who turns into Miss Gulch from The Wizard of Oz. Went from that to playing James Tyrone in Long Day's Journey into Night. It was an extraordinary transition. I don't know how you do that in your mind as an actor, to take that big a leap, that big a change in 3 weeks' time. But he managed it, and it was extraordinary.
Do you want to mention about the Berkeys, when they are and what they are?
I will. They are on November 14th, which is Monday. They are awards in the theater by the Berkshire Theatre Critics Association, which is a currently 34-member association of critics who nominate and then vote for what they believe to have been outstanding, not better, not best, but things they remember, things you can't forget.
Is this in person or Zoom?
It's in person. We've never done a Zoom presentation. We skipped a year because of COVID. We came back last year. We required vaccination certificates and masks. This year we're requiring masks, but not vaccination certificates, which could be a mistake. We'll find out afterward.
And where and when?
It's going to be at the Zion Lutheran Church on First Street in Pittsfield at 7 p.m. on Monday, November 14th. It's a free event.
And it's fun.
It's really,
Distemper shots not needed, right?
No,
Depends.
depends on, yeah, well, since one of the main characters in Shelley's Shadow was a dog, his temper shots may be required. But it's a fun event. We have a lot of fun doing it. We love finding out what the critics from around the realm have felt about the shows produced in that wider region that I described. 15 theaters 15 miles from the center of Pittsfield are included. So it brings in a lot of possibilities. One of the things that I think I will try to nominate myself, but don't know that I can, is Kiss My Aztec, which was a new John Leguizamo musical that Hartford Stage did, which is one of the silliest and funniest and most remarkably unreal musicals I've ever seen. It was so totally enjoyable. It was just like being at Mamma Mia in London when it first opened.
But he did something years ago when he put him on the map in New York. What was it? What was the first thing that he did? Was it
On stage, I can't remember, but
50, 20 years ago?
Solo shows, you know.
yeah, but I was introduced to him in a film, really, to Julie Newmar, which was,
I
okay,
love Julie Newmar.
yeah,
So who are the hot candidates this year?
I have no idea.
So how does it work? They're nominated in advance and then
Yes.
voted that night? or not?
Nomination forms are being sent out to all 34 critics next week. They have just about a week to nominate up to 5 nominations in each and every one of our 22 categories. And then the 5 finalists are sent out in a full ballot. But you vote for one and we figure out who won by the numbers that come in. Since we're so diverse, not everybody sees everything. I'm one of the few people I know of who actually gets to almost everything. Jeff, you do, you're pretty good.
Yeah, I'm not,
I know, but you're not a member. You could be,
I know,
but you're not.
we're not gonna get into that discussion.
No, we're not.
Whether or not you work hard enough?
So one other thing about bravery, are you done?
Yeah,
One other thing about bravery, okay, I saw a play, I didn't review it, I'm very glad I didn't review it because I don't know what I would have written. It's a play called Invasion. And I just have to say about it, which I think, I'm not sure, but I think it dealt with stereotyping and immigration and refugees. I went with some friends, we sat down and behind us were 2 guys. And one had a hoodie and they were talking loudly and they tapped us on the shoulder and said, what do you hear about this play? And so I said, well, I hear that it's good. And they said, that's great. And then the play starts and it's all sort of, it looks like a classical play, like a queen and a king talking, you know what they're saying. Anyway, they're talking and suddenly behind me, these 2 guys are like crinkling their programs and their potato chips or whatever it was and laughing inappropriately. And I kept turning around and I kept saying, be quiet. And other people kept turning around and they just kept making more and more noise. And finally, on stage, one of the characters said, well, I can't go on with this kind of noise. And then these 2 guys behind me got up, went onto the stage, and they were part of the cast. So if that isn't courageous to do a play like that, I don't know what is. When you saw it.
I saw it. I enjoyed it immensely. I thought it was very weird, most peculiar, and an experience that I hope I don't repeat in the near future, because once was enough. But I thought it was a good piece and I liked it.
What is that, the 5th wall? Or is that the 6th wall? What are you breaking?
It's the back door.
Yeah.
Someone raised a question, I wonder if anyone has a thought about, is to, when you write reviews, what focus do you have? What are you trying to pitch and to whom? Is there any distinction? Do you have someone in mind, or what do you look for in other people's reviews?
I really love the comment that Jeff made, which is when you're writing a review and people say you didn't understand it, you missed everything, and that's why you didn't like it. And you say back to them, I didn't, I didn't have anything in my mind in advance, right? I read the materials about the play that I was given. I saw it and I didn't like it. And it feels like people are trying to say to you, you don't have the right to say you didn't like it because you don't get it. And that has happened to me sometimes. And that makes me sort of feel like, gee, I better know everything before I go in. I better study this thing and I better do a lot of research, because what if I don't understand it and I end up not liking it? And it sort of makes me feel, how do I approach this now? And then maybe it's okay to just read the materials that you have and see it and just speak honestly about what you saw.
Right. Who has the responsibility? If the writer cannot convey to his or her audience.
But here's the thing, you're not dealing with direct communication with the writer. When you're dealing with a piece of visual art, for instance, it's direct communication between you and the artist. There's no one there interpreting it. with a play, you've got a director's understanding of the play, you've got the actor's skills. And so and in some cases, if it's not a new play, if it's a play that has a track record, and it's a play that you've seen before, you have that history as well, which as far as I'm concerned, you have to divorce yourself from. What I'm concerned with when I'm in the theater is this interpretation of this production. So the questions for me are, what do I understand the director to be going for? Is it consistently developed? Why are these choices being made? Let's say it's a very different approach than another approach, which I would hope that it would be. So, and some understanding of the background of the play, but for me, that's what I'm dealing with. And I know this is going to sound really odd, but sometimes when I'm starting to write a review, I don't know where this review is going to go. I know what I think generally. I know what my general reaction to the piece is, whether I think it worked, whether I liked it, what I liked about it. But sometimes in writing it, often in writing it, I'm making an act of discovery for me that sort of says, oh, I hadn't thought about that when I was sitting in the theater, but the thought has come to me.
You're sounding like a playwright who doesn't know what his characters are going to do until they, you know.
To a degree, that is.
But what do you think is the responsibility of the critic then in this, is just to focus?
To tell the truth as he or she sees it.
Yeah.
But Barbara said that she had to do research. Now, is that, if you're doing research, are you focusing on this particular production or are you bringing a lot of, go ahead, Peter, you have.
I'm probably on the outside of this. I don't do any research or reading. Jeffrey writes terrific preview articles. I read them after I've written my review, never before. When I go into the theater to review a play, I want it to hit me the way it hits the person sitting in front of me or behind me, brand new, an experience. I want to review the experience. To me, a review is a version of news. And news is how the reporter sees it. It's not necessarily hard cast in one way. For a play, it's an experience, and it's how you experience that experience itself that I write about.
So for me, this is an interesting thing, that an added layer that I have to work through when I'm writing a review, because the situation at the Berkshire Eagle and thousands, I would like to say optimistic, dozens of smaller newspapers like ours. This is not the case with the big papers like the Times and the Globe, where they have separate writers who will do the separate preview pieces. I'm in a situation where I'm also doing the preview piece. It was the same when I was at the Poughkeepsie Journal. And so what happens is, when I go into the theater, I have to cut that off. I have to cut off what and I can remember on at least 2 occasions, I had done preview pieces. The subjects of the preview pieces were really happy. They thought I understood what they said. The reviews, on the other hand, were something other. And I remember I got a really hard communication from the director of one of these shows, or one of the writers of a show, who said to me that they were very displeased with the review, that they were very happy with the interview. They felt that I understood what they were trying to accomplish. And then this review comes out that just undercut all of that. And I didn't respond because I don't do that, but my thinking was tough. You know, I have one job as a writer and a totally other job as a theater critic.
And you may understand what they're trying to do.
Yes.
But you may
And
think they didn't
exactly,
succeed
that
in
they-
doing it.
which was the point here. I didn't think that they came anywhere. The show that was on the stage was not the show that they talked to me about.
Do you feel restricted at all by the fact that you're part of the community and sort of involved with,
No.
and that
No.
you have no compunction whatsoever
No,
of
I don't.
trashing the play?
I don't.
Interesting. Does anyone have any feeling that, that about sort of supporting the good work? I mean, as a whole, even an individual play.
Yes, I will not, because I'm also an actor and director, I will not review plays that anybody I know is involved in,
Oh,
whether
okay.
it's a cast member, or I
You lose a lot of friends.
that's- Well, that too, but I just don't think it's ethical. And I wouldn't be able to detach myself from my feelings and history with this person, with those people. I'm going to echo something Peter said, and that is, when I go see a play, I want to love it. I go in there wanting to be wowed. I want to love it. And I always feel badly when I'm disappointed and like writing the review of the play from the season we all mentioned, Most Happy. That was really hard. And, you know, I mean, I'm very passionate about the theater, as obviously everybody on the panel is. So what I think the critic's responsibility is to lift the art, to help people be aware of what makes theater, and to make people want to strive to make it more accessible to people. You know, I would love to see more educational programs, like Capital Rep in Albany has an education department. They bring in students from schools that have economic challenges.
The theaters here do that. I know that Julie at Barrington Stage has,
Yes.
and also Kate, when they came to talk to the Berkshire previous classes, they always talked about that, and you could really hear that they really felt great about it. Of course, Shakespeare as well.
Yes.
You know, I think I'd like, if Macey is with us, there he is. I'd like to invite him to make a comment. As I say, give us a few words, Macey.
Well, can we open this up now to Q&A from the listeners?
Sure, but I want to start with
I was starting with Macy.
I want to start with Macey and then to see if he's enjoyed us. But I think you're muted.
Okay, so Judith, can you hear us?
Okay, I'm good.
There's Macy.
Oh, hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I want to pick up on some of the things that my friends have said. Jeff mentioned that there weren't too many places that you could get laughs, and then Peter talked about Guys and Dolls and how wonderful that was. And the reason that was outstanding was all tap dance. It was a vibrant, enthusiastic production. But what Sharon also did was sheer madness. Those of you who don't know sheer madness, it is a comedy mystery with audience participation. And they weren't sold out every night, but people went back to see it 3 and 4 times because it was hysterical. In fact, Gloria and I saw it twice, and we saw Guys and Dolls twice. Peter mentioned Long Day's Journey back at the Bridge Street Theater. It was astounding, the work that that company did. And I think the key to it in my mind was they brought humanity to these people, not just the heavy conflicts and complications, but they were humans and they loved each other, but there were things about each other they could not understand. And we were just stricken by it. Yeah, and Peter did not like a Passover. We love Passover, and actually we got the Godot relationship almost immediately. And yeah, and as we were a little bit upset by the conclusion. We said, what the hell is that for? But the intent of the play and the beauty of the acting of all 3 men, it just carried us away. We were wrapped in that. Loved Invasion. One of the reasons that Gloria and I saw A Little Night Music twice, reviewed it, and then we paid to see a second time, was Emily Skinner's Send in the Clowns. What a beautiful, beautiful rendition. Heart-wrenching, touching, wise. The second time was better than the first. We just love that song. Loved Ain't Misbehaving. And I don't know how much time you're going to give me here, but getting back to the Berkshire Theatre Critics Association, the public is invited. is free. It's a wonderful evening. The theater people who are there, there's a camaraderie that evolves, that people share their ideas and their congratulations. And it's a very warm evening. Bridge Street Theater is one of my favorites, one of our favorites, as is Chester, because they really do a lot of adventurous stuff. And Shelley's Shadow was mentioned. And from what I understand, Jeff and I have the same perspective of it, according to John Stoll, the artistic director and the director of the production, in that the acting was terrific, but there were problems with the staging of the script. That, for instance, it takes place in one person's small apartment and a penthouse, and there are a lot of fast narrative comments by a central character, and he goes back from the penthouse to his room to the penthouse. It was like he was bouncing back and forth, and I found that to be very distracting. But the intent of the play to describe the life of an Alzheimer's victim and the caregiver is very personal to me, because a dear friend of ours is going through that. Luckily, we are not. So
We all
Susan,
wish
Jeff-
you well
sorry?
next week. We wish you well next week, by the way. But I wanted to go into the chat. Does anyone have any questions specifically for anyone, or some general questions?
If you have any questions, just raise your hand with the reactions. You can do that, and I'll call on you, and then you can turn your camera on and ask your question. While we're seeing if anybody has any questions, there was a bit of a side conversation in the chat regarding Don Giovanni. And there was a question of what the theater, what you as the critics thought about that.
I'd like to jump in first, but I'm sure everybody has something to say about this. I do want to say that we are incredibly fortunate to have this company, the Berkshire Opera Company, come back festival.
It's the
come back.
Berkshire Opera Festival.
Sorry, Berkshire Opera Festival.
The company's out of business.
Oh, okay.
I was director of Berkshire
Oh,
Opera
sorry,
Company.
okay, Berkshire Opera Festival. They have now come in for the past few years with just beautiful work. It's a full orchestra conducted by Brian Garman, and they have had several directors, but Jonathan Loy is the one who directed Don Giovanni and several others. They both work at the Met as well. They have connections to all these singers from all over the world. So I love them. But I have to say that I was very disappointed in Don Giovanni, not the music, which was gorgeous, but because in this PC time, and I do think we have to sort of blame it on that, Jonathan Loy said in an interview that no, we cannot have Don Juan, the character of Don Juan, be so evil and preying on women, because that's like Harvey Weinstein and Jonathan and what is it? Jonathan, what's his name? Anyway, who killed himself, right, in the cell, right? Anyway, we can't have male characters preying on females at this time. So in order to sort of excuse the behavior of Don Juan, the director said he was going to assign a dancer, silent, never spoke, never sang, a dancer representing the id of Don Juan, who was sort of egging him on to do all these terrible things. And he sort of followed him around the whole play as the id. And I thought that was crazy. I thought it didn't add anything. It detracted from everything. Everybody was in modern dress. It was, to me, the whole concept didn't work at all. And it made me feel that there's something wrong with this. And I wondered how everybody else felt.
Did Jonathan Loy direct that?
Yes.
And he was the one who was so unhappy with the Frank Sinatra version of Rigoletto. So I haven't talked to him about it since I had to go to New York.
Yeah, I disliked the production intensely. The singing was great. The orchestra was fabulous, as Barbara pointed out. But the production, first of all, there were almost no stage lights on. It was all pretty much in the dark. So we had great difficulty seeing most things. And I couldn't understand why. And again, to take that modern slant, that modern view of what is PC and what men should be allowed to do and be seen, it has nothing to do with an opera like Don Giovanni, which was written hundreds of years ago and deals with a particular period in time. It could have been as lewd and as uproarious as intended, and it would have worked. It wouldn't have offended anyone in the audience because we were not seeing something contemporary or new. We were seeing something from 2.5 centuries ago.
Right. The Don Juan myth is famous. It's always existed.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, the name is Jeffrey Epstein, sorry.
Did you, any of you have a discussion with Jonathan Loy about this?
I
No.
tried, but no.
No, Jeff wanted to say something.
No, and I mean, I didn't see it, but the added thing is he pays a price for all of this behavior.
Not
Anyway.
in this production. Only his id went to hell.
But I mean, in the opera.
Yes.
Yes,
written.
yes.
He pays a price for it, so it's not as if
Right.
he's doing all of this miserable behavior
Right.
and
Getting away
winds
with
up triumphant for it or escapes the consequences of it to begin with. So.
Yeah, but again, in this production, that was not the case.
Yeah,
The dancer went to hell. The
But-
singer stayed on stage and waved.
Wow.
Roseanne, did you see it?
Unfortunately, I didn't, but maybe fortunately, I didn't. I feel very strongly that any play must be seen and produced with a great attention to the time and place in which it was written. And
And
Sounds like-
update it at your own peril, I think.
yes,
You have to have a good reason for doing that.
but this, I mean, obviously, from what you're saying, there was not a good reason here.
And I wish we could say that there were no longer any men who abuse women, but it's just not true.
Yes.
Here in the 21st century, there are men who are just as bad as they were in the 17th century, in the 18th century.
But
And
to
Molly-
excuse the behavior, not right. Sorry.
Molly adds that we live in an age of presentism in which people are no longer allowed to view things in their historical context, but should judge history by our present standards.
Oh, that's why I hope that's not right, because it's doing serious damage to classic plays.
I agree.
It was what I think it was Peter Sellers who started, was one of the early converter of opera to when it was going to, I don't even remember what it was, but it was going to take place in a bodega at Upper West Side.
Yes, but he didn't change the morality of the show,
Never, no.
just the location and the period in time. He never changed the morality.
No. And it was astonishing that it worked because I went in as an unbeliever and then I was taken over in this bodega. But I'm very surprised about Jonathan, who I think is more of a purist. And he had made a strong, he did not like the Metropolitan Opera's new version of Rigoletto that looked like Las Vegas. And he said, because it wasn't being true to the, but he may have been something to the opera, but he might have been something about the music rather than the story.
Judith, any more in the chat? Any other questions?
Thank you, Barbara. Yes, we have another question. Might you ask what the critics thought about Anna in the Tropics at Barrington Stage?
I loved it. I loved it. Did you all see it?
Yes.
So it was different. It took place in the 1920s, for those of you who haven't seen it, in Miami, at a cigar rolling factory, hand rolling factory, run and owned by Cuban immigrants. And there is a tradition, apparently, there was at least in these factories, to bring in, I forget what they call it, but a reader.
Reader, yeah.
Reader to either read from newspapers or novels, because the work was so tedious. So in this play, the reader brings in Anna Karenina, and I just thought it was inventive, it was different, it was crackling. The story is, the novel is mirrored within the action of the play. I loved it.
Yeah, I thought that the play was decently presented, but in the original production, the reader was played by Jimmy Smits,
Yes.
who is physically dynamic and almost overwhelming. And in this production, the reader was a decent actor, but he didn't have the same kind of physical influence over the female characters in the play. The lines were still there, but we never felt or saw that influence, and that was a mistake, and I think it took away from the play.
I totally agree with you, because I've seen it in New York, and there was a physicality and a sexuality that Jimmy Smith had. And this man, as you said, was a nice actor, but he was a nice man. There was a tension, but it's the concept that was interesting, that people are rolling things and that someone is reading to them. I didn't think it went further than that, but I.
Let's see what Jeff says.
You want to comment on it? Did you see it or not?
Yeah, yes, I did. It's actually the second time I've seen it. I didn't see it in New York. The only other production I saw was at Capitol Rep years ago.
Wow.
And it almost put me to sleep. And I thought, well, part of it is the play, maybe it's the production. This production didn't put me to sleep, but it didn't engage me either. And I just didn't feel, I do think there is a problem with the play, although the concept is fascinating. I mean, it is historical truth. But the connections amongst the characters just didn't work for me in performance. It just went on for 2.5 hours with a break.
I couldn't even take a part.
And again, for me, in a way, this is the hardest kind of review to write, because when you see a show, or when I see a show that sort of sits right in the middle, it's not great, it's not exciting, but on the other hand, it just kind of sits there. It's competent, but it doesn't necessarily lead to any
Can you
freshness.
repeat that?
I'm going to use that in an excerpt quote, a quote here. So those are sometimes for me the hardest kind of review to write, because you want to convey to the reader that it's okay, it's neither this nor that. And how do you really do that? And in the centuries I've been doing this work, I still don't know how to do that kind of review effectively.
And did you see it, Barbara?
No.
Oh, I see.
And so Judith, I'm not sure. Yeah, well, I think we're out of time. Is there anything pressing that we need to?
I don't have any more questions in the chat, and nobody has their hands up, so.
So Naomi,
What are the 12? Am I reading it wrong? Are there 12 things in the chat?
No, there's nothing new in the chat.
Nothing new in the chat,
Okay, and we are
no
out of
new
time.
questions, so. Yeah, I'm going to say thank you to Peter. We've got one other question, a question about Berkshires online. Will the Berkshires be shown online or on Zoom in some way? Will it be live streamed?
It probably will not, but we're hoping that Berkshire Public Television will film it again and show it in subsequent weeks.
I want to thank everyone. I really enjoyed this. I think this is sort of a self-indulgence on my part. I love these people, love to hear what they say, and I like it particularly when there's, different points of view and things, because it gets us all excited. There's no right and wrong, with minor exceptions. But thank you all. Next year, we're hoping that everyone will be healthy, the theater will be healthy, and then we can go forth and do our Berkshire previews and having the artistic directors. Have you all met have you all met the new director, artistic director, Barrington Stage? He has quite an impressive resume.
He does. We'll see what he does here.
Are you giving him an honorary Berkey for openers?
No, that takes a while.
Welcome to. Thank you again. And wait, there's a question. Yes.
Hi, yes, I'm interested in doing some acting, and I don't know who or where to approach. I have no experience, but I think that I may have some talent in that area. I know this is a little related but off subject. And I was wondering.
Yes, I think that you should check out online Berkshire on Stage where Roseanne and I post our reviews. There are also many audition notices posted there. So I would check that out if I were you.
Okay, thank you.
And I would also, I'm sorry, I would also recommend looking for an acting class.
Do you know where I should look for one?
Patrick White?
Patrick teaches, there are a number of people, but do you live in this area or in the
No,
county?
Well, I'm in Pittsfield.
I'm sure there are places in Pittsfield, Shakespeare and Company offers all kinds of workshops.
Okay,
And Patrick White also offers acting. workshops.
In Albany.
In Albany.
In Albany.
yes.
Bye, everyone. Thank you very much and good luck, Macey.